Hey, everybody. We are live right now at the Paste Studios in New York with Bruce Cockburn. Bruce, thanks for being here, man.
Very glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a total pleasure to listen to the sound check thus far. It's been amazing, and I can't wait to share what you do with the internet right now. We're going to hear 3 songs today. One of them is going to be off of Crowing Ignites, which comes out September 20th on True North, and we're going to hear a couple of other songs from across the catalog. And can you tell us what you're going to start out with?
Yeah, I thought I'd start out with something fairly peppy. This is a song called Night Train. It's from some years ago, but I would, from some people's point of view, this would be an old song, but in my, because I've been around as long as I have, it's kind of a middle-aged song. I wrote it under the influence of absinthe, which I did deliberately because I wanted to see what all the fuss was about, and I'm not sure there was all that much to fuss about, except that I did get a song out of it, and that's this Night Train. Not a knife throw from here, you can hear the night train passing. That's the sound somebody makes when they're getting away, leaving next week's hanging jury far behind them. A prisoner only of the choices they've made. Night train. Night train. Ice cube in a dark drink shines like starlight. The moon is floating somewhere out at sea. I'm an island in the blur of noise and color. Alcatraz, St. Helena, Patmos, and the shadow deep. Night train. Night train. And everyone's an island edged with sand, a temporary refuge where somebody else can stand, till the sea that binds us like the force tide of a blood oath will wear it down, dissolve it, recombine it. Anyone can die here, they do it every day. It doesn't take much effort, though it goes against the grain. And the ultimate forgetfulness of violence sweeps the landscape like the headlight of a train. Night train. Night train. Ice cube in a dark drink shines like starlight. Starlight shines like glass shards in dark hair. And the mind's eye tumbles out along the steel track. shadow with its stare. Night train. Night train. And in the absence of a vision, there are nightmares. And in the absence of compassion, there is cancer, whose banner waves over palaces and mean streets. And the rhythm of the night train is a mantra. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Thank you. That sounds great. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming here and doing this. This is exactly the way that I want to be spending my early afternoon on this Wednesday. So, can we talk a little bit about, considering the room that we're in? There's these. We got to chat a little bit offline about. This is some rock history, some jazz history, going back to the oldest tape in here is from 1953, and it seems like a conducive spot to talk about influences and where you came from. But I also realized that asking that influence question is. I hope that it comes across in the spirit of respect in which is intended, because I'm sure there are many more artists who've been influenced by you than there are ones that influenced.
Oh, I'm not sure
you.
about that. I appreciate you saying that, but no, I'm not hesitant to talk about influences. And it would be a long conversation if we covered them all, though, because basically, starting out, the thing that made me want to play music was the earliest rock and roll. The early Elvis Presley records and Buddy Holly and Richie Valens, people like that. And then I wanted to play guitar because that was the music. The minute I started taking guitar lessons, I got exposed to other stuff, to standard tunes and the kind of the jazz lexicon, even though I wasn't studying jazz per se, but it was the songs that for a long time were the mainstay of the jazz world. And then I got interested in jazz as a result of that. And then when the Beatles and Bob Dylan came along, I got excited about songwriting. And after a while, I thought, geez, maybe I could do that. But I went to Berkeley in Boston for a couple of years studying composition. Before I was writing songs, I had imagined I would be a writer of music for large jazz ensembles or something. But then the songwriting bug kind of caught me, and I dropped out of there and spent the second half of the 60s actually, in a way, trying to avoid influences, except that Jimi Hendrix was a huge influence, guitar playing wise.
Were you here at that? Were you in the city at that time, or were you bouncing around everywhere?
I was
at that
in
time?
Ottawa. I was in Boston to go to music school, but I grew up in Ottawa in Canada, and went back there after I dropped out of school. So the second half of the 60s, I was kind of back and forth between Ottawa and Toronto. And, then, well, that remained true actually all the way through the 70s until I moved to Toronto at the end of that decade. But influences are legion for everything from Renaissance music, European music, to kind of avant-garde stuff. While I was at Berkeley, Albert Eiler appeared on the scene, and that the whole kind of free jazz thing opened up, and that was very exciting. and I mean, I never had the chops to be an actual jazz musician, but I love that music still,
I would imagine you're going to get some comment. I haven't looked at the comment section yet, but I would imagine that people are going to push back on you not having the chops to be an actual jazz musician.
well, you know,
I'm
this
sure,
I was going to say specialized set of skills. It's not specialized because it's very broad actually, but it's a particular set of skills and a particular way of hearing music. You know, that allows you to be, in my view anyway, a competent jazz player. I think, and jazz is, at this point, it's such a catch-all term. You know, back in the '60s, when you said the word jazz, most people thought of quite mainstream kind of stuff, and if they were a little hipper, they thought about Miles Davis and John Coltrane and people like that. And I mean, I hear Coltrane in my playing, but it's a poor second to the real thing, you know. So I don't see myself as a jazz player per se. I mean, I just don't know enough about that stuff. But I know a fair amount, and I've kind of not intentionally particularly, but over time, you know, just applied various of the principles that I learned in that world to my own songwriting and playing.
Well, good. I'm glad I asked the question. Albert Eiler is a new name for me, so that's
you
always
gotta
what I
check him
hope is
out.
going to happen when I ask that question.
Fantastic saxophone player. I mean, he was quite controversial in the day because the music was right out there on the edge, and you know, some people said he was garbage, but we loved him. We thought he was amazing, and I played in a little rehearsal band, if you could call it that. It was just jam sessions that happened in one of my schoolmates who basement apartment. He happened to be a drummer, and it was him and two bass players and me, and then anybody else that came down and sat in. There was a trumpet player that would show up quite often, and every now and then other people. One of the bass players played cello sometimes, and we just would start playing with no plan, and you know, play the Saturday away, more or less. You know, I mean, it was daytime stuff because couldn't make that racket at night. But and we more or less drank the local liquor store's entire supply of Ripple or whatever the awful wine was that it wasn't a healthy time exactly, but it was very it was full of creativity and it was a great springboard.
Great. Great. Well, yeah, that's, I mean, like you said, the influences are myriad, and not even does it need to be necessarily limited to musical influences. I mean, the influence of absinthe and the influence of Ripple are real things that aid that process as well.
Well, I mean, I think one has to be careful about promoting that notion because we've seen lots of people come to grief because they think they need to rely on stuff like that to be creative, and I mean, whether it's drugs or booze or any other of those sorts of aids. And you know, I'm not anti any of it except when it becomes a
Sure.
problem, and it's very easy for those things to become problems. So that you got to be careful. But there's a certain conviviality that goes with, you know, sitting around drinking cheap wine and playing music, and it does pull the players together. I mean, I think the blues world is full of that sort of history, but you know, you gotta be careful.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming here and doing this today. We appreciate it very much. And I also, before I forget, I do also want to show you sitting in that room. We've got the original reel of the last performance that the John Coltrane Quintet ever did. Alice is on it. Pharoah Sanders is on it, and it was the Newport Jazz Fest 1966. And we've got those just in the other room, which I'd love to show you.
Wow, yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah. So we'll move about 20 years. In time through the catalog right now. You're gonna do one from your previous record. Bone on Bone.
The album's called Bone on Bone. It came out just 2 or 3 years ago now, and this is a song from it. The title song is an instrumental piece, but I'm going to save the instrumental thing for the new album, which is entirely instrumental. So this is a song called 40 Years in the Wilderness that's on that. You won't hear any Coltrane in this, I don't think, but... 40 years in the wilderness, getting to know the beasts, projected and reflected on the greatest and the least. 40 years of days and nights, angels hovering near, kept me moving forward, though the way was far from clear. They said, take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone, comes undone. 40 years in the wilderness, dancing with the flies, dazzled by the visions rolling out before my eyes. Angel-made graffiti, demons in disguise. You could trade away your birthright for another day's supplies, or you could take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. Take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone, comes undone. Rising with the height of land, falling with the crowd. Spirits in the scouring wind called my name out loud. Said you could go to heaven, you could go to hell, you could hang out in between in the place you know so well. Or you could take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone. Take up your load, run south to the road, turn to the setting sun. Sun going down, got to cover some ground before everything comes undone, comes undone.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
So you're moving from this song into one of the new songs off of Crowing Ignites, and that's coming out on September 20th. Can we talk a little bit about the production of the album itself? Can you talk a little bit about what that process was like working with Colin? And I know you've relocated, you said about a decade ago, to San Francisco, so it was a San Francisco centric production. It sounds like an interesting space that you guys did it in as well.
It's a good story. Well, maybe you had to be there, but it was a good story for me. Colin Linden, who produced the album, has produced my last 10 albums, I guess, except for, well, all the albums since the mid-'90s, except for one of them. We got the idea of doing an instrumental album. that would be kind of volume 2 of one of that we did a few years back, an album called Speechless, which was mostly a compilation of previously released instrumental tracks with a few new pieces on it. And we kind of thought, okay, we'll do Speechless 2. It seemed like a timely thing. But then I ended up writing so much music that it became its own thing. It's not Speechless 2 at all. There's nothing previously released on the album. It's all new stuff. And I was trying to figure out, I have a young daughter who when I'm in town, I'm responsible for getting her to school in the morning and picking her up at the end of the day. So I'm trying to think, okay, how can I record this album and not disrupt that pattern?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine has a place that she calls the Firehouse. She uses it for special events, and they have Shabbats there and stuff like that. So I got invited to a party there, and they had an amazing. This is all very kind of weird juxtaposition, but an amazing Greek band from Seattle came, an acoustic band came and played. And they sounded amazing. The music was great, but the room sounded great. So when I was trying to figure out how I might do this, I thought maybe, just maybe. So I ran into my friend Ann in a local cafe, and I said, "What would you think if we took over the Firehouse for a week to make a record?" She gave it about 30 seconds thought and said, "Yeah, it's a great idea." So, and it's called the Firehouse because it once was a firehouse, the building. It's, but in the days of horse and buggy, I think, because the doorways are too small to admit a modern fire engine. But back in some era, it was a firehouse, and it had been converted into a rather nice 3-bedroom condo by some previous owner, and then Ann took it over, and it was a wonderful place to work. It was quiet, beautiful. It's kind of constructed on the open plan. There's 3 little bedrooms, but the rest of the space is common space, and that meant we had a lot of room to work and set ourselves up. And Colin brought in portable recording equipment, and we had this great week there. Then we went to his studio in Nashville to do the mix and a couple of overdubs.
Cool.
Yeah.
That sounds like a very, very comfortable and organic way for something like this to come to be.
Yes, and the great thing was I could walk my daughter to school, go record all day, and then go and pick her up at the end of the day. And it was like the school is 2 blocks from where we were, and our where we live is 2 blocks the other way. So it worked out very well.
Nice. Good. Can you tell us what you're going to do off of Crowing Ignites?
Yeah. I have to do a little tuning before I can do it, but it's the first piece on the album. It's a piece called Bardo Rush. Bardo, I had a conversation with Khaki King, who's a great guitar player.
Yeah, we've got a tape of hers from Newport Folk, 2007, I think, maybe. So there's some Khaki King in here.
She's a really neat player. But she and I were talking. We were on a radio show together somewhere, and I asked her about the title of one of her pieces, and I can't remember what the piece was now. "Legs to Make Us Longer," maybe, something like that. And she said, "Well, you come up with this music, and then you got to call it something. So it's always a struggle." I know what she's talking about because I go through the same thing. I mean, you got to figure out a way of referring to that piece of music that's a little cooler than guitar piece number 34 in D minor or whatever it might be, right? Like the way the classical stuff is cataloged. So it's I go by the mood that the piece kind of conjures up in me. The Bardo Plain, if you're familiar with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is where you go if you don't die right. Basically, it's not hell, but it can lead to kind of hell-like dimensions. It's a bit. I think there's something of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that in there that maybe they drew from ideas or imagery in the Book of the Dead, but because these other places you can go could be quite demonic, and they're not where you want to be anyway. Ideally you want to get off the whole wheel, right, and just get out of things. But anyway, how this got to be the Bardo Rush, and how you get to Rush. I guess the hope is you're rushing out of that state. It's used in Jungian psychology too to describe the state that most of us go around in most of the time, which is kind of lost. So
I've got. Did you read Lincoln in the Bardo by any chance? Are you familiar with that?
I'm intrigued by the title, but I have not read the book. No.
It is just what it sounds like. It is Abraham Lincoln after he dies didn't die right, and so he ends up stuck sort of they're physically still in the graveyard,
right.
But he's with all the other people who haven't died right from that graveyard, and it's an entire story about. Excuse me, it's not after Lincoln's. It's after his son died, and so it's his kid in the Bardo, and it was a George Saunders book from last year, and they're all sort of trying to figure out how to get through it and how to pass on to whatever's next.
Right. Well,
I think I have it outside, actually. If I do, I would love for you to take it. I think it's just on the bookshelf right there.
I would love to read it. The point of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, at least as I understood it, is to guide the recently deceased through those difficult passages and on to ideally nirvana, or at least to the best of their next lives that they could get. And it's full of instructions, and it's read to the newly dead, and they believe that can be helpful. But I have a feeling that people won't be playing this piece in the ear of the newly dead, but you never know, I guess. This is Bardo Rush.
Right. Man, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming by and doing this. We appreciate it very much. We just heard two songs from earlier and one song from Crowing Ignites. That's coming out September 20th. Again, if you're just joining us, it'll be out September 20th. And you're doing a 40 plus, there's more than 40 dates around North America. It's starting September 7th at the Sisters Folk Fest in Oregon. There's a ton of dates. They're all up at brucecockburn.com. But back here at the Murmur Theater in Brooklyn on October 24th. And the whole thing wraps up with 2 nights at the Freight and Salvage in Berkeley on November 22nd and 23rd. So please travel safely, of course, between all those dates. And thanks for coming and doing this, man. I've enjoyed it very much.
It's great to be here with you, and thanks for having me.